Hey, good morning, each and every one of you. Robert Phoenix here, once again, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas, where it is a beautiful day. We had a lot of rain over the last 3 days, so the sky is nice and clear and kind of a mixture of azure and teal, without a lot of those pesky chemtrails in the sky just yet. So we have a lot to cover on today's FOF. We just had somebody show up in the chat room. That's always, well, at least just show up in general. That's always a good thing. Got a lot to cover today. There's a lot going on as usual. There's a lot of nothing. There's absolutely nothing happening. In the grand scheme of things, there's really nothing going on. It's all just a play and all just an illusion. Morning, Jennifer. Nice to see you. Thanks for waking up early. I wake up early to be here. President Counter, hello. Hello, Mrs. Anderson. I can't help myself, Judy. I just can't help it. Agent Smith takes over. I think we all have an Agent Smith inside of us every now and then. Got to watch out for that. Got to watch out for the inner Agent Smith. Yeah, there's the smile, the toothy grin. So we have a lot to cover today. But again, there's really not. I mean, think about it. This is all just a play. There's really nothing going on. It's all just like, the theater of your mind. But since we're here, we may as well play with it, pull it apart, and have some fun with it. Hey, what's going on? What is going on there, Miss Alexis? How are you? There's Maury. Good Maury. Maury. How are you? There's Rita. Lovely Rita. And then Equicentric. All right. We are assembling. We are assembling. Our power is growing with every person that comes to the chat room, right? Our power grows. It becomes quantum. And there's Lynn. Good morning, Lynn. This is great. I feel like a teacher, and the kids are coming into the classroom. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. Visa haircut. Haha. Yeah. Visa haircut. Yeah. I need a haircut, man. One of the worst things is like older dudes with long hair sometimes. I mean, if you're an older dude and you've got like really long hair and it's gray and kind of funky, some unconditional love for you. I'll take it. I'll take it. Because I'm a projector. And so if I get the unconditional love, guess what? You get it back, because that's what I do. I amplify. That's what we projectors do. So it's a really selfish act for you to give me unconditional love, because you're going to get it right back. That's what happens. I'm a boomerang. I'm a boomerang effect. You ever see old dudes though with like long hair, older dudes with long hair? I mean, it's really most of the time not a good look. The only time it's a good look is if they're like super eccentric and maybe they're a professor, a college professor, or I don't know, a terrorist. No, I'm just kidding about the last part. So there are some things going on in the world, and we're going to cover some of those things today, and hopefully dig into a little bit of social and spiritual commentary along the way. And of course, I'm going to bring you some interesting news today, and there are a couple headline items that I wanted to share with you, and two of them, I think all three of them relate to sort of to where we are in a way that's really how do I say this? Not that inspiring. So I wanted to read this piece. This is actually a really good piece. This is off a website called Mint Press News, and apparently they do a lot of citizen journalism, a lot of citizen activism. And this is actually a really well written and well researched piece by Dr. Amira Abu El Fatou. And you may not have been following this story, but it's a very interesting one and fairly important. And there is a journalist with the last name of Khashoggi. And what's his first name? It's not Adnan. Let me see if I can find this. This is the one thing about the new journalism. They don't follow certain rules. Let me just find his first name here. Give me one sec. Once I get there, you're going to dig this article because it has a lot of history and fills in, a number of blank spaces about the United States relationship with Saudi Arabia in particular. Okay, so there's this journalist named Khashoggi, and he was essentially abducted from the embassy, the embassy in Turkey. It's the Turkish embassy. So I'm going to read this to you, and here's the headline: Trump insulted bin Salman, so he retaliated against Khashoggi. Okay, now Trump went over to Saudi Arabia right after he got elected, and he did that big $500 billion deal with Khashoggi. I mean, not Khashoggi, bin Salman, and was raving about it. And what's his name? Jared Kushner got on the phone with Lockheed or one of the defense contractors and said, we need you to, have a little wiggle room on this deal. If you do, you can sell a lot more. And they did. And so they piled it on and they high-fived and drank mint tea till the sun came up. Okay, so I'm going to read this. This is from yesterday. Frankly, this was not the first, and it will not be the last time that the American president, Donald Trump, insults the Saudi king. But we are a nation who is afflicted with forgetfulness. While the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, visited the U.S., the American president said in a phone call to the Saudi king, "We're protecting you. You might not be there for 2 weeks without us. You have to pay your military. You have to pay for your military. You have to pay." Now, doesn't this sound like something Trump would say? This is not out of line with Trump. And so it's not. Trump has made such remarks before, but this is the first time he has repeated such comments at a political rally before the eyes and ears of the world. He is humiliating Saudi Arabia and offending his king publicly, not behind closed doors, where we are certain that worse and uglier is said. In my opinion, Trump is a man who is honest with himself and operates based on the logic of business and the language of numbers and calculations, not the language of politics and diplomacy, which he never learned or doesn't understand. Now, this part is true. This is true. Trump is not a diplomat, and he doesn't pretend to be a diplomat. Trump is all about going in one direction, and that's forward. Diplomacy is about zigging and zagging and zigging and zagging and taking time and biting. Diplomacy is like fly fishing, where you get out in the river and kind of lost it. Kind of lost it. I got. And finally, after hours of patience and taking in the river, taking in the trees, and taking in the wind, and redoing the wonderful fly that you put together yourself, perhaps maybe a fly that is a different fly. You might have changed flies just to see what would happen. Maybe change bait. All these things that lead into the conditions you actually bring that fish. And that's like diplomacy in a lot of ways. You don't scream at the river. You don't scream at the fish and say, "God damn you, fish, get out of the river. Jump right into this right now." That's not diplomacy. Trump's style would be kind of more like, I don't know, a Japanese oil vessel looking to harpoon a whale. I think that's more Trump than fly fishing, and that's not diplomacy. You look for the pod, you go after it, and then you spear it, and the deal's done. So I'm going to continue to read this here. He is a businessman, has not let go of that part of himself, remaining loyal to it, and has become the central part of what makes up his character. We watched him during his presidential campaign promise the American people the money of the Gulf and threaten the Gulf leaders, who he likened to cows, with milking them and then slaughtering them. He's now keeping his promise and doing good on his threats. It is ironic that the Gulf leaders heard Trump's warning. They were the keenest on and supportive of him. Now, this is an interesting. Remember, this guy is a professor. Countries such as the UAE, United Arab Emirates, spent tens of billions of dollars spent tens of billions of dollars to ensure his victory over Hillary Clinton, who, according to them, supported the Muslim Brotherhood. She probably did. Hillary Clinton will go to the highest bidder, and somebody who, at the very least, resembles whatever her tepid ideology is, a combination of crass crony capitalism masquerading as soft socialism with a shot of identity politics thrown in for good measure. So here we go. The Muslim Brotherhood phobia will continue to haunt them and blind them until they lose their thrones themselves. Oh, look who's here. Look who's here. Say hi to everybody. There you go. Yeah. He's gotten good at saying hello. He knows that green dot. You see that green dot there? You're a good boy, aren't you? Okay, now you need to chill out so I can focus and concentrate and tell these good people what's happening over in that part of the world. All right. So this is a really important point to understand, okay? Because what we're looking at here, and the title of today's 15 Minutes Flame is Gangstalking, Global Gangstalking. Because what we deal with governments aren't really governments at all. What they are organized gangs that are credited, usually, for the most part, with certification, suits and ties, makes them look very, very respectable. But the same tactics that gangs use have been incorporated into what we call theoretically democracy, or in just the political game in general. So let's look at gangs. Let's look at the threat. So the Muslim Brotherhood was created by MI6. At that time, MI6 was MI5 because it goes back a ways. We went from MI5 to MI6. It's a new generation of MI. MI6, of course, British intelligence. MI5, British intelligence. They created the Muslim Brotherhood. Why? Why did they create the Muslim Brotherhood? Because you always want to create some level of opposition so that you can control the opposition. In fact, the Salafist Wahhabist sect of Islam was actually co-created by the House of Saud and MI5. Though that goes back to the 1930s and 40s. So while they're doing that, they also create the Muslim Brotherhood because the Muslim Brotherhood can foment tension. And if you're living in an area where there are crown princes and kings and sultans, these are people that want to sit on their wealth. They don't want to abdicate their thrones. They don't want to have to lose power. So if there is this imminent threat like the Muslim Brotherhood, which is lurking behind every corner, which could theoretically take them down, what do? You pay for protection. You pay for protection. It is extortion. It's extortion at the highest level. So that's one of the functions of the Muslim Brotherhood. It creates a threat, an internal threat, controlled opposition, keeps everybody over there on their toes so they can dish out whatever it is they're dishing out, and then the West, of course, can take advantage of them so that they don't lose their perch, their position of power, all their 30 virgins or whatever it is that they're holding on to, plus unlimited trips to great department stores. What's Harrods in England? Okay, so I'm going to keep reading this. He is now keeping his promise and doing good on his threats. It is ironic that even though the Gulf leaders heard Trump's warning, they were the keenest supportive of him. Okay, I read that article, that paragraph. Let me get to the next one. Trump was not satisfied with the $500 billion he took from Saudi Arabia. $500 billion, 500 billion, right? That's what I said. $500 billion he took from Saudi Arabia during his promising visit last year. He wanted more milk this year as the annual payment for protecting them, as he has reiterated in 3 consecutive speeches made in less than a week. Now, I think it's interesting the places that Trump goes for his speeches. Here we go. In Mississippi, he said, "We protect Saudi Arabia. Would you say they're rich? And I love the king, King Salman. But I said, King, we're protecting you. You might not be there for 2 weeks without us. You have to pay for your military. You have to pay." Did he say that about NATO too? 2 days before that, at a rally in West Virginia, he said, King, you have got trillions of dollars. Without us, who knows what's going to happen? With us, they are safe. But we don't get what we want. We don't get what we should be getting. In his last speech in Minnesota, he said, excuse me, King Solomon. He is my friend. Do you mind paying for the military? Do you mind? Pay! I said, do you mind paying? But nobody asked me. But I said, but I'm asking you, King. Total Trump. The truth is that despite the brazen language, far from the diplomacy followed by the world leaders that carry explicit threats, Trump was also correct in what he said. Yes, the U.S. is protecting the al-Assad throne. This is an old agreement that was made during the secret meeting between President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdul Aziz al-Assad, the founder of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, aboard the USS Quincy. Just a little bit of history here for you. The truth is that although the language of sophistication is far removed from the diplomacy of heads of state, and the style of humiliation carries a clear threat, but Trump was also correct in what he said. This is an old agreement between the U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdul Aziz al-Assad, founder of Saudi Arabia, aboard the USS Quincy cruiser on February 14, 1945. It is known as the Quincy Agreement. The most important clause in the agreement stipulates that the U.S. will provide unconditional protection to the ruling al-Assad family in exchange for Saudi Arabia guaranteeing the oil supply the U.S. deserved. The deal was supposed to last 60 years, and then President George W. Bush renewed the agreement for another 60 in 2005. Trump was also truthful regarding the protection the U.S. pledged, but he wasn't accurate regarding the stipulations Saudi Arabia adhered to for decades. Saudi Arabia was generous, and not like he said, not at the desired level. Saudi Arabia also controlled the world oil prices through OPEC, keeping it at a price that pleases the U.S. and obeyed the order of the American master. Now Trump is attacking OPEC and said in his speech before the UN General Assembly, OPEC nations are, as usual, ripping off the rest of the world, and I don't like it. Nobody should like it. We defend many of these nations for nothing, and then they take advantage of us by giving us high oil prices. Not good. Of course, that's Trump. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, love him or hate him. I mean, this is high theater. We've never seen anything like this. You know, the language of diplomacy is based on innuendo. You don't really come out and say things in diplomacy. You sort of hint at them and get people to think about it. What did he really say? What did he really mean? Did he mean if we do this, we're going to cut something off? Wow, I need to think about that. Maybe I should get some clarification. The clarification comes and there's more innuendo, perhaps at a deeper level. And it's getting people to do things without actually posing a real threat. When you have innuendo and you're holding cards, it can be a very, very powerful tool. It's the unspoken, right? And the unspoken hits the subconscious and creates a number of different associations inside the subconscious, most of which is fear. Okay, here we go. It is interesting that Saudi Arabia did not respond to Trump's humiliation as an independent sovereign state, nor the insult of its king, with any official statement issued by the royal court, followed by a firm political stance or stern diplomatic action against the United States. No, they don't have sanctions. They don't do sanctions. They do something else. However, a week later, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told Bloomberg, I love working with him. You know, you have to accept that any friend will say good things and bad things about Trump. That's what he said about Trump. This is a shameful response, no less shameful and humiliating than Trump's remarks about them, as bin Salman's response confirms Trump's remarks and indicates the fragility of the Saudi state and supports dependence on the U.S. However, it seems that the arrogant youth bin Salman, yes, he's a millennial, who rules the kingdom, has racked his brains for a new way to respond to Trump in a manner that allows him to seek revenge and regain his dignity. Because Trump is dissing this guy. He is dissing the crown prince. And if you're crown princes don't get dissed very often. So if somebody disses you, it's like, whoa, holy shit, this guy's taking shots at me. And he's got the guys in the court. Your Royal Highness, you must not let this man humiliate you. Your presence, your image, the people. He cannot gain the upper hand. You must take back control. So this is what he did. He abducted the Saudi journalist who writes for the Washington Post. His name is Jamal Khashoggi. So he works for the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos' newspaper. Trump probably doesn't give a shit because it's Jeff Bezos' newspaper. But anyway, it is a symbolic abduction and then some. So he did this in Turkey after ambushing him at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Jamal Khashoggi entered the embassy and had not emerged. In 4 days after he was abducted, the Turkish and Saudi sides exchanged narratives and claims about whether or not Khashoggi was in the consulate. The Saudis have confirmed that he left the consulate, while the Turks claim he did not, and that he is still in the embassy. Claims were made back and forth until Reuters announced his death on Saturday in the embassy, and unofficial news stories were reported. The Turkish authorities have not issued any official statements regarding his death so far. While the security sources leaked statements of him being killed, surprised if one of those body parts was sent to the Washington Post and probably the White House. This is how these people do business. This is why I'm saying that governments are gangs and ties. That's what they are. This is gangland warfare and extortion. And it's been going on for years. And what Trump is doing now is he's making it visible. He's making it visible. There's everybody in the world who is a president or a king or whatever title they've been given. They're basically thugs, is what they are. Like Angela Merkel's a gangster. Theresa May's a gangster. I know it's hard to wrap your head around, but that's how the game works. And there's really like one gang leader. There's one really big gang leader, and that's the Rothschilds. They've got the biggest gang on the planet. So what we have is these little insurgent gangs that every now and then decide that they want more turf, more territory. They want more protection money. This is what it is. And this is what he says. Here we go. This is the action of criminal gangs and thugs. I've been saying this. I've been saying this for the last 10 years, that this is what these people are. Criminal gangs, it's being exposed before our very eyes. I mean, this is a lot of Pluto and Capricorn. We're getting to see like the dark underworld forces behind governance. Pluto was discovered during the time when the mob was just starting to rear its ugly head in Chicago, of all places. Al Capone. What did they call the mob? They call it the underworld. That's Plutonian. So what we're seeing now is the Plutonian excavation of this thing that we call government. And we're seeing the underworld elements that are seeping up from the bottom. And Trump is he's like a portal. Whether you like it or not, like him or not, this is what I'm telling you, Trump is a phenomenon. And I'm not here to love and support Donald Trump in a MAGA kind of way. But he is a phenomenon in the sense that he is bringing a kind of natural anarchy to things, whether it's the press and fake news or real news, or whether it's exposing how countries do business, how deals are made, and the flimsy veneer of diplomacy, handshakes and smiles that are really just like a bow and a tie, wrapping paper and a bow around what's really a very kind of seamy agreement in many instances. I'll continue to read this. This is the action of criminal gangs and thugs, not countries governed by a constitution, and treat their citizens based on the rule of law. Hello, when do countries like really, start like that? Hasn't really happened in this country for a very long time. The rule of law in this country went out in 1913 when when the Constitution was amended so we could have the Federal Reserve Act. So this guy's a little starry-eyed in some ways. Diplomacy, democracy, wonderful things. But come on, let's get real here. Nobody really wants peace. They don't. Peace is bad for business. It's really bad for business. Trust. You want peace? Okay, if you want peace, like go back and watch. Go back to like Tahiti in the late 1800s. It's probably a very peaceful place. Am I right? Probably incredibly peaceful. What was the GDP of Tahiti in the late 1800s? Okay, there you go. That's what I'm saying. There's no big money. There's the peace is not an enterprise. Although it could be. I'd love to have a peace-based economy. Wouldn't that be interesting? What if we had an economy that supported people who did good acts, people who treated people kindly? What if we had that kind of economy? Holy smokes. You could actually rack up, say, crypto based on the things that you do in the world. Yeah, it could be, the universal economy model, but what if it was separate from that? Wouldn't that be cool? Well, there is kind of that thing. It's called your spirit, your soul, and that goes onto the bank accounts of your consciousness. It's called the Akashic Records, by the way, and it comes back to you. So we're going to talk about the spiritual life today as well. So we got three main topics we're going to cover today. This is the first one. Let me continue with this. Okay. I'm just going to read this paragraph again. This is the action of criminal gangs and thugs, not countries governed by a constitution and treat their citizens based on the rule of law. Such actions are not new or strange to the Al-Assad family, as their forefathers established their kingdom over the remains and bodies of the tribes they unjustly and aggressively invaded. Hello? This is the nature of humanity for the most part. The uncivilized organizing principle. It's tribal. It's about power. It's about resources and everything that goes along with it. And you get nice white robes and nice little rings of Saturn around your head as a result of rising to the top. This is neither the first nor the last time that the Saudi opposition figures were abducted from exile and deported to Saudi Arabia. The country has a shameful and long history in this regard, as it seized the dissident Nasser el-Sayed from Beirut in 1979 with the help of one of his Palestinian friends from the PLO, and his fate remains unknown until today. Kidnapping dissidents are not limited to members of the public, but have also included members of the royal family. The fate of many remain unknown. I mean, look back at the beginning of the year when bin Salman was abducting people inside the house of Saud, hanging them upside down in the Riyadh Hilton, beating the hell out of them, getting money out of them so he can pay Trump. It's true. There are thousands of male and female scholars, clerics, intellects, economists, university professors, and activists behind bars. Yes, this is what happens when you establish an evil monarchy, which is really just another name for a gang with a gang lord. The announcement of Khashoggi's assassination was a shock that shook the world humanitarian conscience. Does the world have a humanitarian conscience left? I don't know. It's a good question. How could this happen to a peaceful man and a journalist who has nothing other than his thoughts and pen to serve the humanitarian issues, freedom, justice, and dignity? Sorry. Those are wonderful things, by the way. Wonderful. But he was, he became a symbolic sacrifice. First, he worked for the Washington Post. Secondly, he was a man that had, from all accounts, some really good character traits. So when you sacrifice somebody who sucks, does it really matter? Like there's that scene in True Romance at the beginning of the film where Clarence Worley goes in and kills Drexel the pimp, played by Gary Oldman. And basically, the sort of the unspoken narrative is when a pimp is killed, when a pimp and a drug dealer is killed, the cops don't care. They're actually thanking you. So there's no benefit to sacrifice somebody who has less than desirable character traits. But when somebody does have good character traits, all of a sudden that sacrifice becomes much, much more powerful, both energetically and symbolically. All right, I'll continue. He was a staunch supporter of the Arab Spring revolutions. Hey, how about that? That means he was a Hillary supporter. Or Trump's probably thanking him. He's like, great, take another one out. Believing they would rise again, that a revolutionary wave was on the horizon. He thought that democracy was the solution in the Arab countries, especially those witnessing civil wars, such as Yemen, Libya, and Syria. Okay. Khashoggi carried the concerns and issues of his nation, and the Palestinian cause was his main focus, and believed that the return of the nation's fighting spirit. This guy is a good professor. He's not a good writer. So now Khashoggi is a champion of the Palestinians. So if they're trying to get back at Trump because they're taking him out, and Trump, by the way, just cut the annual aid package to the Palestinians, do you think Trump gives a shit? No, he probably just ordered another Big Mac. Among his latest tweets, posted after attending a conference on Palestine post-Oslo, organized by Middle East Monitor in London, a day before traveling to Turkey on that fateful day, I leave London with Palestine on my mind. I attended a conference and discovered researchers and activists who believe in the fairness of the cause from all over the world, despite the strength of the Israeli lobby, which has besieged any sympathy with the Palestinian cause, but our voices are still high. In our world, they're trying to disregard Palestine to break our anger, but it is present in our conscience, in the conscience of every citizen, even if they are silent. Okay, those are wonderful words. And by the way, I agree with him about Palestine. You know, I believe that those people have the right to exist. They were there before that calamity happened in 1948. But if they're doing this to get back to Trump, they need to rethink their gangland tactics and strategy. To be quite honest with you, he's not going to give a shit. Maybe the critics of Trump will use this against him, but you know, I think Prince bin Salman needs to watch The Godfather a few times to get the rules of engagement correct. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you because, number one, it is an expose of how things happen at a high level. It's usually extortion and usury. And this is how the global economy operates, extortion and usury, with a few other small line items thrown in for good measure. Let me check in with you guys in the chat room, see what's going on in the chat world. What do we have? Trump's just the right kind of crazy to bring change. I think he's the only one. You're going to get, look, here's the deal with Trump. You're always going to get two sides of the story. You're always going to get like he's a Gemini on steroids, right? Sun-Uranus conjunction, born on a lunar eclipse. You're going to get something like breaking up the form, exposing the form. And at the same time, you're going to get a guy that is, you know, wanting to roll out 5G as fast as possible and build the strongest, most complete and imprisoning control grid on the planet. You're always going to get this with Trump. On the one hand, you'll get, you know, the fake news and busting people like CNN and MSNBC, right? You're going to get that stuff. And on the other side, you'll get, you know, the toadying up to Israel and moving you're always going to get like equal parts stuff that's really interesting with Trump and breaking up the form. And then you'll also get the other stuff, which is hey, what happens if we take away a few more of your rights, or what happens if we, really just throw out the balance of power in the Middle East, and we do everything that Bibi Netanyahu said. I mean, so you're going to get equal parts of both, and that's going to be par for the course. And if you can accept that, right, there's a lesson here in some ways. There's a lesson here about duality in life, because your life is going to go through periods where things are going to go pretty well, and they're going to go through periods where your life is going to suck, and you're going to have challenges, and you're going to have to go through things. And sometimes those periods will be simultaneous. They'll happen at the same time. You could have one really good thing happening. You could have another thing that's really, not so great. So, this is what Trump brings to the table. He shows us in a lot of ways that life isn't always fair, but it can also be very interesting with intended and unintended consequences. And through those intended and unintended consequences, there's chaos. And when we have chaos, there can be the possibility for change. Okay, there's the possibility for change. And Trump is a chaos agent at a meta level, So it's interesting. It's a work in progress, and we're watching things happen. We're watching. Here's what's really going on another level. Trump is actually gaining power. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm a cheerleader or I'm banging the MAGA drum. But all you have to look at is the fact that the Russian collusion investigation is going nowhere. They got Paul Manafort and George Papadopoulos, and they got them for like tax bullshit. Nothing having really anything to do with the Russians. And what about Michael Cohen? Michael Cohen, the guy who they basically stripped of his legal right to practice, went in and took all of his records illegally, tied him to Stormy Daniels and the payment. He was the guy that was supposed to have all the explosive information that could take Trump down. What was that? That was about 5 months ago now, 4 or 5 months ago. What's the upshot of that? See, all these things have happened, and Trump is still there. And every day that they don't get any closer to removing him, he gets stronger. And if the Republicans take the midterms, and I do believe they will, and I'm going to talk about some of that today, then it's a slam dunk. It's a slam dunk. The only chance that the Democrats have, the only chance that the quote unquote deep state has, is if they can flip the House. And if they flip the House, as Steve Bannon said, there's a really good chance he'll be impeached. And again, I'm not here to throw any shade at Trump. I'm just giving you the dynamics around this thing. Okay. According to George Webb, Khashoggi's dad was kingpin in the Middle East. Yeah, that's Adnan Khashoggi. Yeah, Adnan Khashoggi is more than just a kingpin. He was not just a drug dealer. He was a weapons peddler. He was an arms dealer. He moved arms back and forth between so-called terror groups. I know all about Adnan Khashoggi. Still, at the end of the day, it's a bad symbolic gesture in terms of wanting to take somebody out and showing that, that Trump political Darwinism on steroids. Yeah, I think there is psychopaths through the world. People, look, you get into two groups, right? There's the herd, and then there are predators. There's herd consciousness, and then there's predator consciousness. Do you think herders wind up in politics? No, they don't. If they did, they'd be doing something else. They wouldn't last. Every now and then you get somebody who's theoretically a good person who gets elected. And how long do they last? Not very long. They're either devoured or they're bitten by one of the parasites and infected with the psychopathic virus. This is what happens. Yeah. Jasper says, yeah. So the world is based on there's predators and prey. That's it. Now we're going to get into the third option, which is the spiritual option. And I'm going to talk about that. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay. The other piece that I wanted to talk about, and this is nutty stuff, man. This is really nutty stuff. If I can find this. Let me see. That's the other story I want to read. Where is it? Hold on. I gotta find this thing. It's I set all this up. It has okay. So there was a big rally in Portland, which is the new St. Petersburg, the new Moscow of the United States. And let me see if I just got to find this thing. Okay, here it is. Here it is. This is good. So this is from Zero Hedge. I got to read this. It's hilarious. It's scary, but it's hilarious at the same time. And you'll get the irony when I show it to you. So they had an unannounced march in Portland because of somebody who was killed. And I think the guy's Simmons. Let me find out here. I'll read you the story quickly. It says, well-known conservative columnist and author Rod Dreher reacts to a shocking video which emerged Monday showing masked Antifa members taking over an entire busy intersection and claiming the authority to direct traffic in an American city. So I'm going to read you some excerpts here. Notice that these thugs, here we go. There's the terminology, thugs, politics, power at a street level. Notice these thugs include white people using racist anti-white language in order to get drivers to do as they say. Is this America? Is this routine in Portland? Why are the Portland police not arresting these people? That's true. The police were there. They didn't do shit. Stand down orders. If that's the case, why don't you just let Antifa police the streets of Portland? Be a lot cheaper, don't you think? Portland taxpayers. It's muscle. Okay. What's worse is that after a dozen or more of the anarchists usurped police authority and actually threatened drivers who didn't obey their dictates as they hesitantly pulled through the intersection, the real police have confirmed that they watched and did nothing. The footage further shows multiple instances of cars being hit with rods and fists for refusing to obey their commands. I'll beat the shit out of you, men standing in the middle of the road shouted at passing cars. We don't need your KKK in Portland, Oregon. Another shouted at a man for merely having North Carolina plates. This is where it's funny. This cracks me up. Drivers are prevented from going left while Antifa members shout down justifiably angry drivers who are being forced to turn right. Is that symbolic or what? Now, if you're Antifa, I have to say you're a bunch of dumb motherfuckers, right? I mean, think about that from a symbolic level. They're forcing people to go to the right. If you're sitting on the fence and you see this, you're saying to yourself, is this the future of America? Is this where this is headed? If you're on the fence or you're kind of a left centrist and you're seeing that this is the masked face, the covered face of your party, you're going to take that right turn too. I mean, if you're Antifa, don't you at least want to get the people at that intersection to turn left instead of right? These people are idiots. Who writes their script? Go right. Go right. You racist bastard. All of a sudden, people are looking at okay, I know where I'm voting. I'm turning right. So there's an elderly dude. I saw the video. An elderly guy. Scared shitless, probably. You have these banging on his car. They damaged his car. And there's one guy hanging on to his holding his bumper. And look, it's about 5 miles an hour. The guy doesn't want to hurt the guy. But can you imagine being the driver and you're looking at that masked face holding on to the bumper? The guy in the masked face is crazed, but he's not letting go. He's not letting go. His nickname is Pitbull. What does Antifa party with? Microbrews. Microbrews for you. Did you imagine an old guy? Then here's where he goes. Here's where it goes really wrong for him. He gets down, he clears himself of the traffic, gets down to the stoplight, and then he stops at the stoplight. Like, if he's an older guy, he's just like probably freaked out and traumatized. And then here they come. It's like, it's like The Walking Dead, and they're just chasing after him. And he's probably can look at them in his rearview mirror. Oh shit, here they come. And what does he do? He gets out of his car to inspect the damage. There's something to be said about the innocence of the move. But quite frankly, if I'm that guy, if that was me, okay, I would have done two things. I wouldn't have stopped at that light. No way. No freaking way. I would have like, look, go through the light, kept going, or whatever. I'm not sitting there waiting for the angry mob to descend upon me after I toss Pitbull to the curb. I'm not doing that. That would be one thing. The other thing is I'd put the car in reverse and hit the accelerator and take out about 6 or 7 and just say I was so freaked out that I unfortunately had the car in reverse and I tried to get away at the light. And I mean, if you had to go through and use that as a defense, probably be pretty plausible. Absolutely plausible. So there's either talk about fight or flight, right? I mean, it comes right down there to that moment. To the guy's credit, he took a third option. He got out and expected the damage. He should sue the city of Portland. Indeed, one elderly man was nearly beaten by the mob. As a separate video, at what appears to be another intersection, shows the mob chasing him down for refusing to stop when he was presumably in fear of his life. This is ridiculous bullshit. The elderly citizen stops his car after making it through initially blocked intersection after the group had pounded us. This is the guy I'm talking about. Immediately after, the senior citizen shuts his door. The crowd starts wailing on his vehicle with the baton holder smashing into the door. Clearly appears the driver was only moments away from being savagely beaten. What the fuck are these people doing? Come on. Just remember, Antifa, you're making people turn to the right. It is symbolic. To the right, not to the left. You rewrite your traffic script. So what we have here is we have gang and thug behavior at a high level and gang and thug behavior at a street level. The only difference is suits and ties, dollars, position, history, and power. That's it. So I wanted to bring this in now because this is really, I think, one of the most important pieces. Before I do, let me just check in you chat rumors. So we got here. Philosophy is promulgated, justified. Police did nothing. Yep, did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a thing. Eric Holder, Finca says, Lynn says, Eric Holder is a perfect example of a thug. Kick them when they're down. I hope they replay that clip over and over before the next 2 elections. Yeah, absolutely. You got people playing by different rules of engagement. It's the way it is. I want to read you this story because I think this says a lot about our time and the reason why we have groups like Antifa who are unhinged, and even people that aren't affiliated with groups who are having a very difficult time living on this planet right now. This is from The Guardian. World and mental health crisis of monumental suffering, say experts. So The Lancet is a British journal of medicine. And they just published a report that says 13.5 million lives could be saved every day if mental illness is addressed. I'm going to get back to that point. I want to talk about the statistics And I want to talk about the sort of the global picture of mental health, what it represents. Every country in the world is facing and failing to tackle a mental health crisis, from epidemics of anxiety and depression to conditions caused by violence and trauma, according to a review by experts that estimate the rising costs will hit $16 trillion. $16 trillion by 2030. You know what that means? That means invest in pharmaceutical companies and tell your kids to grow up to be shrinks. Shrinks will be the new lawyers. A team of 28 global experts assembled by the Lancet Medical Journal says there is a collective failure to respond to this global health crisis, which results in monumental loss of human capabilities and avoidable suffering. The burden of mental ill health is rising everywhere, says the Lancet Commission, in spite of advances in understanding of the causes and options for treatment. The quality of mental health services is routinely worse than the quality of those for physical health. Well, those are pretty fucking bad, says the report launched at a global ministerial mental health summit in London. When it comes to mental health, says the commission, every country is a developing country. Think about that. Every country is a developing country. That's what they want to do with climate, right? In climate change, every country is a developing country, which means the United States is a developing country. So we're a developing country. We're right in there with Djibouti. If you're in Europe, you're right in there with places like Djibouti. And look, I'm sure Djibouti is a very nice place, but it's not on a scale of Germany or France or England or Spain or Russia, or even China. I love saying Djibouti. Burkina Faso. The burden, okay, here we go. The burden of mental health is rising everywhere, blah, 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 blah. Okay, when it comes to mental health, every country is a developing country. Government investment and development assistance for mental health remain pitifully small, says the report. The high cost of $16 trillion by 2030 is estimated from previous World Bank data. Little hand in glove, little notch in groove. World Bank, World Mental Health. In some countries, people with mental disorders are abused and incarcerated, it says. Sure, of course. Human rights violations and abuses in many countries, with large numbers of people locked away in mental institutions or prisons or living on the streets, often without legal protection. Professor Vikram Patel of the Harvard Medical School, joint lead editor, said mental ill health caused colossal human suffering and was responsible for substantial numbers of deaths that are attributed to other causes. Mental health problems kill more young people than any other cause around the world. Suicides are attributed to deaths from injuries. Opioid deaths are considered to be drug misuse. We are treating mental illness as a risk factor, said Patel. A lot of global health priority setting has historically been around diseases that kill. The commission estimates that 13.5 million deaths every year could be averted if the underlying mental health problems were addressed. In many countries, there is no expectation of help. Surveys in India and China, which have a third of the global population, suggest that more than 80% of the people with any mental health or substance use disorder did not seek treatment. And when they do seek help, the quality is poor. Human rights violations occur most often against people with learning disabilities and those with mental health disorders such as schizophrenia. Tens of thousands of people with mental disorders are chained in their own homes or in prayer camps and traditional healing facilities, says the report. Well, that's a weird thing, right? Tens of thousands of people with mental health disorders are chained in their own homes or in prayer camps and traditional healing facilities. So where do they go? Right? I mean, if they're chained, like a traditional healing facility, sounds like it may not be a bad thing. Recovery center. You chain to a recovery center, prayer camps. For some people, hey, it works. Homes, chain to your home. What are we talking about here? What is the real kind of underlying message of this report? Crazy. Human rights violations happen in your homes. You know that? Absolutely. Human rights violations happen. It's bullshit. When people are freed, and maybe without warning or proper preparation for their care, leading sometimes to arrest, imprisonment, and early death. In 2016, a tragic case occurred in South Africa when the Gauteng Department of Health stopped funding a large 2,000-bed facility and allowed the discharge of vulnerable people with psychosocial disability into improperly licensed community residential facilities, leading to the death of more than 140 people, says the report. South Africa is not a great example, okay? Extremely unstable place. The commission recommends much higher priority for mental health and parity with physical health care, as well as integration of mental health care into routine primary care. Okay, so there are a couple of things about this report. Number one, it is addressing, I believe, a real issue, and that people are struggling to deal with this so-called version of reality. We are in an era of unprecedented and accelerated maximal change, maximal transportation in a peak, not even quite peak yet, but in a phase where chaos is also part of this process of acceleration. Like, you can have really good accelerated growth. Let's say, for instance, you're a weight trainer and you discover creatine, which can really help, burn fat, cut muscle. That's accelerated growth. If you just train with weights and use creatine, and which is legal, buy it over the counter, use it, you will get bigger faster. That is accelerated growth. If you use the right fish emulsion and compost in your soil, you will get accelerated growth. If you use the right grow lights and the right hydroponics, you will get accelerated growth. But it's accelerated growth that happens in a streamlined and functional fashion. You throw a bunch of other vectors into that take it way off course, and you have accelerated growth that turns into a Frankenstein monster. GMOs, for instance. Steroids, if you want to use the weight training metaphor. So accelerated growth isn't bad. If we go through a period of accelerated growth that metastasizes, is terrible. And that's where we are now. And it's not even really growth per se. We're going through an accelerated change. And the world is changing in ways that we couldn't even fathom 30 to 40 years ago. We have these ciphers around us. The world is supposed to look the same. It does look the same to some degree. The school that you went to 50 years ago just might be there. And it just might be a functioning school, like the one across the street here, which has probably been around since the 1980s. Okay, it's still there. It's still functioning. There's schools from the 1950s. There's a school right here in town. It's a middle school. It's been around since the 1920s. And it's still a school in the functioning. So we have these ciphers that say the world is the same. But the world is not the same. The world is changing rapidly and across every single platform of our lives. From personal relationships to family relationships, to the food we eat, to the content we consume, to the technologies that we use to consume that content, to the fact that we're now able, in many instances, to legally take substances into our bodies that 35, 40 years ago, 50 years ago would land you in jail for an extended period of time. These are rapid elements of change. We're talking about changing sexes. We're talking about inserting technology into our bodies. The media itself has taken on and become this occult theater where we're bombarded by occult symbolism, which is based on a religion and theater of chaos. And a chaos that never ends. Do as thou wilt, right? So this is what's going on in the world. And we, by and large, are organic beings. For the most part, most of us have been hacked at this point on some level, whether it's through frequencies, whether it's through genetically modified organisms, whatever. We've been hacked. And what we're trying to do is deal with the hacking. This is like survival of the 21st century, right? And to get kind of above it if we can. That's another discussion. So of course there are going to be mental health issues. We're living in a time of unprecedented change. Well, for all intents and purposes, the world around us remains mostly, and I say that for now, mostly the same. Mostly. But it's not. And this is where people are struggling. It's not the same. We are like creatures in the forest, right? We're organic. We have parts of us that connect us to the natural kingdom, the natural world. And what happens with animals who are in a natural setting, a forest, a jungle, a savanna? They are sensitive to their environment. And what happens when there's a fire on the horizon and they can smell it? Or what happens to their perturbations inside the earth and they can feel it? They can feel it, sense it before other people, quote unquote, can, because of their connection to the natural world. They move. You'll see them. They'll migrate. They'll go to different places because they know something's amiss. Unfortunately for us, we have really no place to migrate to. That's a whole nother episode. But we are like those animals. And so instead, where do we migrate? We migrate into the nether regions of sanity, the fringe, because the world is a bit fringy, to be quite honest with you. What this all points to, more than anything, is this is not a mental health crisis, although to some degree it is, not to the extent that they'd like you to think it is, because where they want to take this is full on, like when you go to get a physical, this is where this is going. When you go to get a physical, well, how's your ticker? How's your blood sugar level? How are your triglycerides? Can you breathe for me? Okay, let me see your eyes. I mean, it's like, okay, you go in, you go for a checkup. That's a physical checkup. Mental health checkups are coming. They're coming. And what they want to do is they want to spot potential mental health deficiencies even before they become, quote unquote, apparent. And those mental health deficiencies will come through screenings. There'll be genetic screenings. If you're predisposed towards some kind of mental health disorder, whether it's Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, whatever that is, schizophrenia, a neurosis, perhaps even an extreme food allergy, which could affect your thinking, your well-being, and your efficiency in the workplace, it's going to be on a report and you will be treated for it. This will be part of the new universal economy, by the way. Mental health screenings will be, they'll be mandatory. But what we're really talking about here is a spiritual crisis, a crisis in faith, a real crisis in faith. There are so many disruptive technologies, and I'm not dissing disruptive technologies. They're part of what we're having to deal with now. But we're dealing with so many disruptive technologies, and more to come, by the way, that people cannot deal and assimilate the acceleration of change. And I talked about that with the taxi cab drivers. Those guys are canaries in the coal mine. They're driving around and, some of them are new to the country. And sorry, this isn't the United States circa 1935 when you get off a boat and go join a work crew somewhere. It's just not quite like that right now. So they get here and they say, boy, this place is really expensive. I might have been better off in Somalia or maybe Afghanistan, where I could have lived with my family. Quite possible, right? This is a spiritual crisis. So how do we address the spiritual crisis? For all intents and purposes, Christianity is taking a beating. Catholicism, every day now, there's a new one. There have been bishops in California that have been exposed. We have more pedophilia inside the Catholic Church. That institution basically went down in 1966 with Vatican II. It was over. They've been infiltrated. They were infiltrated by Zog. That's what happened. So the Catholic Church, as an institution, some people will clap and say it's about time. But I will say this about the Catholic Church, and I'm not a churchgoer, and I'm certainly not Catholic. But pre-1966, pre-Vatican II, for all of its bullshit, for all the crap with the popes, all of its huge amounts of wealth that it had amassed, for all of its harboring of secret society within the Catholic Church itself, there was something inherent about the liturgy, about the Latinate Mass, that had spiritual power. Spiritual power. You understood things, right? You understood whether it was superimposed by a Saturnian figure, i.e., the priest, whomever, that there were consequences for your actions. Consequences. Long-standing consequences. Like burning in fucking hell for eternity kinds of consequences. Okay? Those are big consequences. Kept people on their toes. Of course, you had confession, which helped ease the pain of those consequences a little bit, right? But there are also moral codes that were involved in that. Some of those moral codes were actually good ones. Charity, compassion, kindness, treating others as you would treat yourself. You think that's what Antifa practices? No. That's why that happens. They don't give a shit. They're treating that man as they want to be treated. So for all intents and purposes, they should be treated that way. Right? Especially if the police just standing by. Well, if they're the police, then you can be the police too in that moment. Getting a little off course here, just a little bit. But the reason why we have mental health issues is because we're having a spiritual crisis. Now, I'm not saying that we should all go run to the Catholic Church and become Catholics. No, I'm not saying that. The Christian churches have metastasized into these tumors of just endless grabs for money and resources to have even bigger churches and even bigger influence and bigger political influence. It is the absolute antithesis of what the original message was. And then, of course, there's this internecine connection between the dispensationalist churches and Judaism and Israel. We have Christian Zionism, who will cheer on the death and the suffering of the Palestinians. Of course they will. Of course they will. Is that an answer to the crisis of faith that we have? No. What about the Buddhists? What about being a Tibetan Buddhist? Well, your leader is one of the most corrupt religious leaders on the planet. Dalai Lama. It's not a great guy. Sorry. Bust some bubbles there. Maybe Zen Buddhism, silence, retreat, connecting in with the void, the Tao. Perhaps a little Native American practice, being aware of the environment, the four corners, ancestors, Mother Earth, Father Sky. Perhaps there can be some avenue of spiritual source that we can connect into. That's where we get into nature. And a lot of people, because of the fact that we are so disconnected from who we are as organic beings and not listening to really the intuitive warning signs, the instinctual warning signs that we're feeling, that also means we're cut off from nature. We're totally cut off from nature. We are over-civilized to the point where we have no idea what it's like to really feel this primal beat in our hearts. And not the same primal beat that Antifa is pounding away at. That's different. Those people are hijacked. And I believe their spirits are possessed. I'm talking about something different. So in order for us to really tackle the mental health issue, there's got to be a number of things that we have to really embrace. Number one, we got to get back to nature. Number two, we got to treat each other a hell of a lot better. Number three, we have to understand that we are responsible for our actions, both from this plane of existence, but also in a much bigger way. That at the end of the day, when it's all said and done and the lights are out, you gotta answer to a higher order. And you've got to come clean with what you've done during your time, right, in this dream. And that's important to understand. And most people don't get that. And the other is that there is a power and a faith that's available to us. And I know a lot of people diss Jesus. He didn't exist. And again, I'm not a Christian, but I'm telling you right now, there's a model there. Now, I think we need to update the model. That's my blasphemy. That is my heresy. I believe in everything that was in accordance with that life, right? However you want to slice and dice it. It's a model. And I believe in everything in that model, except I think there's unfinished business. The unfinished business was turning the table on the merchants in the temple. That's the unfinished business. And I don't think the two, by the way, are mutually exclusive. That's the unfinished business. Anyway, we are in a spiritual crisis, and that is why we are having a mental crisis. And I feel for a lot of these people. And once they get into the system, and once they start taking meds, and once the mental health industry gets a hold of them, $16 trillion worth of mental health industry, good luck. Good luck. And now, guess where we are? We're to like generation 2 with mental health. Let's say, but go back to the 80s. Go back to the 80s. The 80s is when Zoloft and lithium and Prozac, this is when the SSRIs were introduced in the 1980s. Some of the people that have been on SSRIs since the 80s are still on SSRIs. They are. I don't have any statistics. I don't have any data. But I would throw it out there that if you're taking SSRIs, let's say you're on the vanguard, let's say 1989, and you're taking Prozac in high school. Okay. I'm betting that that's going to have an impact on your genetics. It's going to change your DNA. And as a result of that, at some point, man and woman, you're going to have a child. You're going to have a child. And the DNA and the genetics are going to be impacted. This is again, I don't have any statistics. It's going to be impacted by the SSRI, which is genetically modifying the individual. And so your next generation might be a little bit sketchy. The next generation might have some SSRI issues. It's quite possible. It's quite possible. And so then what happens? Now we're bringing in a new generation that has its own inherent mental health challenges. I think we're about into generation 2 around SSRIs, at least generation 2. I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. Anyway, this is a much bigger picture. And the reason why we're having mental health issues is because we're having spiritual issues, a spiritual crisis. I'm going to leave you with this other interesting story about the rapid acceleration of social change and how one thing looks the same, but it isn't really the same, which causes a monumental and colossal sense of displacement. This is from AOL. And the story is Walmart just made an announcement that may make you never want to shop there again. Walmart has plenty of haters, but for many consumers, Walmart's prices just can't be beat. You can't afford to be choosy when you're on a tight budget. If price is not so much of a concern for you, what if you discover that Walmart wants your personal data? Of course, everybody wants your personal data. Not just data about your shopping behavior, which we already give hand over fist to Amazon in the name of fast shipping. Walmart is interested in what's going on in your body while you shop. The want to collect this data is a particularly creepy way through the handles of their shopping carts. The company recently submitted a patent for the US Patent and Trademark Office called System and Method for a Biometric Feedback Cart Handle. These innovative shopping cart handles would collect your biometric data, meaning your stress level, your body temperature, your heart rate, all while you're strolling through the aisles of your local store, filling your cart with Walmart's everyday low-priced items. Walmart is wisely putting a positive spin on why they want to collect shoppers' biometric data. Say someone was unwell while shopping in one of their stores. Their pulse becomes erratic, or their temperature drastically changes. The shopping cart handle would transmit this info real time to a server, which would then notify a Walmart associate to go check on the person. Have you been to a Walmart? We have one here in town. The people that work there are lovely people. They're blue collar people. It's a place for a job in this town. They can get health benefits. But unless they're certified in CPR or have a modicum of quote unquote medical training, I don't want a Walmart person checking on me. Sorry. What happens if you get an overzealous Walmart person? Because you know there's one in every store, right? There's always that, wherever you go, there's always the overzealous person. Well, I'm calling 911. No, it's too late. I'm calling 911. It's like, no, don't. That sounds awfully altruistic for Walmart. It's probably not the only reason America's largest retailer wants to collect information about what's happening inside the minds and bodies of consumers while they shop. That's right. But what if Walmart could see if your heart rate increases when you pass a new display? Ooh. What if they could see it drops when you walk by another? Oh. This technology would essentially monitor how customers are feeling while they shop. By the way, when you walk through a Walmart already, they know how much money you have in your wallet. Every wallet has an RFID strip in it. And they have technology that scans how much money you have when you walk through that door. Or entice people to stay in their stores for a few minutes longer, which is a tried and true way to get people to spend more. Though the creepy shopping cart handle doesn't exist yet, it's not hard to imagine it quickly coming to fruition if the patent is approved. Similar technology already exists on treadmills, which have sensors and handles that can gather your heart rate. The technology itself isn't inherently bad. Intent matters. Even when the purpose of certain technologies is good, bad actors can still use it for not so good purposes. Is Walmart a good actor or a bad actor? Up for you to decide. You see, that is an example of the world that looks the same, but has changed, radically changed. When a shopping cart is no longer a shopping cart, but for all intents and purposes, it's a spy. And it's spying on your biological and autonomic activity. And somewhere inside of us, we register that. And what does it do? It creates a sense of displacement, cognitive dissonance. That's just one example. What if Walmart wants to reverse it? Ooh. What if they want to send signals through the handle? How about that? What if they're able to actually understand what hertz frequency your body is actually resonating at? And that they could send the signal backwards to your hertz frequency, hack your body, and then direct and guide your shopping experience. You see, that's the thing they're not really talking about. So we live in a very interesting world. And part of what we do here on a daily basis, we expose it to the best of our ability. So you and me can be less freaked out, anxious, and scared because we know what's going on. We may know the extent, the full extent. I don't think anybody really does. But to the best of our ability, we do. And usually, in most instances, I'm kind of ahead of the curve a little bit. So you're in a good place because I'm a good canary in the coal mine. Trust me on that. On the spiritual side of things, it just really comes down to taking care of yourself. And I started a revolution with my body, and I'm continuing to work on it. I go to the gym every day and do my best to stay fit and healthy and completely. I don't have a terrible diet, but it's getting cleaner, leaner. That's all coming. This is where it starts. It's ground zero. It's where you live. It's where you live. I was talking with Steve and Chris a few months ago, and I was telling them about my commitment to exercise and getting healthy, and they're doing the same thing. And when you look at the videos we do, you can tell that there's a difference. Their skin looks great. They've got kind of this energetic aura about them. So this is ground zero. You got to start there. Got to treat your body well. You got to really navigate the biological minefield that we're in. And then you've got to do things spiritually that are really good for yourself. Caring for yourself first and foremost. Caring for other people is a really important act. Caring for people is love in action. It is how God manifests through us when we care for another person. Whether it's a stranger or somebody in our family, we're able to bridge a gap and get over some petty disagreements. There are things that are big, wide, canyon-sized gulfs that sometimes take a lifetime to work on, unless, of course, you can have an epiphany, which can happen in a second, in a nanosecond, and everything can change. But you can work up to it. You can work up to that change and practice something on a daily basis. And know, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Most High, God within, dwells inside of you. And you're responsible for that. You're responsible for that inner dwelling and that inner flame and to keep it lit. And part of that is being grateful for even the fucked up world and accelerated change that we are in. If you're grateful for it, there's benefit. We are in a time of accelerated growth. We're in a time of heightened chaos, change, unprecedented. But there's also opportunity. That opportunity exists inside of you to be able to meet what we're going through to the best of your ability, not necessarily head on, but to dance with it, right? To dance with it, to find the right moves, the right steps, to become more graceful with where we are, where we're headed, and where we're going. All right, I think that's about it for today. A little chatism. Let's see what we have here. Wear your disguise, nose, and gloves when you leave the house. That's funny. The new version of Alexa's AI will detect your voice signs, depression, yeah, absolutely. It's intrusion. Let's see, what do we else? The perfect way to detect if you've had your vaccine today. Yeah. It'd be funny if everybody showed up with gloves. I thought about that. Don't think that the gloves will save you. They'll figure out a workaround with that. Trust me. They'll figure out a workaround. It'll be like a whole body sensor or something like that. Because they know this shit, right? They know that. For a while, people won't care. Then it'll get out. Oh, wear gloves. Okay. We'll create whole body sensors. See where they go from there. All right, Annie, thank you for showing up. Anybody else here? Let's see, children of the simulacrum, slight unrealistic likeness, semblance, image. Good to hear. Indigo. Let's see, what do we have? Meister Eckhart, Rumi. So mystics, one and all, unwanted followers. Notice that? Not the way the Matrix. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Rumi didn't want followers, but he got them though, didn't he? He got them. Yeah, but he was killed by the followers of Shamsi Tabriz because they were jealous of his relationship with Shams. Our teacher loves you more than he loves us. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Use your head to discern material, your heart to say what is possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Join me tomorrow for the Friday forecast. Got some great news. Well, it's not really great news, but I have some insights of the world that is being created right under our noses. It's going to blow you away. While we're all at each other's throats, I'm going to give you a glimpse and an insight as to what's taking place in this world. It's going to blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. See you later.